It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Mrs Ita Cymerman, MBE, Bichan Yerushalayim, and really thank you so much for agreeing for us to listen to your incredible story.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's always a wonderful opportunity to speak about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kindness and chesed in having allowed me to survive and to be able to do a couple of good things too, and to have this wonderful family. So I'm very grateful. Okay, I'll start off. I was born in a little town in Poland, as the stories go, a place called Jaslo. It wasn't so small, but it wasn't big. And I come from a Hasidic family that, as far as we know, were always Hasidic. They were Hasidic under the nose of Stalin. My father and my uncle, the only two brothers that survived out of 7, they kept their identity, not only their identity, but they kept their Hasidus. They sported beards, and they looked like Yidden, and they behaved like Yidden under the most extraordinary circumstances. So this is all in Poland. I was born in Poland, along with, I suppose, many generations that were Polish. And the war broke out, 1939.
Can I ask, how old were you when the war broke out?
I was a baby. I was just born. So I don't remember that, but I know that. When the war broke out, my parents and my parents and my uncle and my aunt, those stuck together. There was 2 brothers of 7 who survived, and those 2 brothers, Chaim, my father's brother, and Lucas, my uncle, those 2 kept together throughout their lives. In the war, they fled together. In Russia, back to Poland, to England, and that's where they were lived to. 2 brothers Schlaff. But that's my background. When the war broke out, obviously, the reason why we're here to tell this story was because Hashem put it into their minds, and they had the money, I have to add, to flee. Most people in Poland did not survive because A, they didn't have the money to go anywhere. They just about had enough to bear the day out, you know. They didn't have opportunity to travel. To travel, to flee, you have to have money. And so it was beshared for my parents and my aunt and my uncle and my mother's brother and sister to make off just in time to avoid Hitler. We actually left when the war broke out. Horse and carriage, I don't know if there was any train. I don't remember hearing about trains, but I do remember about the horse and carriage. Because that was the means of travel in Russia. There were trains, the trains
towards
were...
Lvov.
Huh?
Towards Lvov.
Eh?
From Yasta to Lvov.
I don't know what you're saying.
In the direction from Glasgow?
From Yasta to Lemberg.
I don't know if we went to Lemberg. I know that Lemberg, I don't know where Lemberg came, but yeah, first we went to Lemberg, which was still part of Poland at the time, but it soon was taken over by the Russians. But we didn't stay that long. We saw that the danger was chasing us, and therefore we fled to Russia. When I say we, I'm always talking about my parents, my sister Pesha, who was older than me, and my aunt Raja with Fetaluchem, and Lala. Lala was their only baby, and she, you mentioned Chaskel. Did you mention Chaskel Shlach? Well, he has an older sister, my age, 3 months older than me. And we went through our lives together, Lala. There were 2 brothers, Shlach, out of 7 that survived. And Lala's father was one of them, my father's was one of them. Now, we fled.
Actually,
What do you want?
the Russian forced you to...
Well, no, wait, no. Russia didn't do anything at the moment.
They forced you to flee. You fled
Well,
Lemberg.
you had to flee because the Germans were occupied
Because
Poland.
you didn't take the...
Huh?
Because you didn't want to...
Well, no. That's a separate part of the story. No. The reason why we fled was the Germans came, and only the people who fled survived. If you stayed under the Germans, the best that would happen to you would be a concentration camp. So there wasn't much choice. We didn't wait for that choice. We fled to Russia, and the reason being is because they had their violence. And there is a saying, and I'm afraid I've seen it many times in life. Of course, it's beshared who should live and not. But unfortunately, money is one of the main passports of life.
Yeah, but you were in Lemberg and then they chat with the
What's the difference, really? Let me get on with it. You're distracting me. It doesn't matter. You're distracting me, Pete. You're not interested in the detail. You just watch the story.
Whatever you say, it's very good.
It's good. It's okay.
It's
Doesn't-
good.
Anyhow, I'm not going to tell you all the stops that we made and whatever, but we fled from. Main thing was that we got out of Poland in time, just in the nick of time, before the Nazis came. We went to one place and went to another place. Eventually, we went deep into Russia.
Did you have any mishpacha in Russia?
No, absolutely not. But we were quite a nice family. That's, I believe, one of the reasons why we managed to survive. Because together you're strong. It was my father and my uncle and my aunt and Lala, who was a baby, and me and my sister, who was older than me. And I think by the virtue of us sticking together helped a lot in our survival. Because people who went on their own didn't have much chance. There were so many difficulties and so many obstacles to overcome. But these two brothers, with their brave, courageous, wonderful wives and the babies, we fled. And we went to one place and to another place, and how it went to go, you just go from place to place. Eventually, we were settled in a place deep in Russia that was called Bakhushev. True, as my son mentioned, we didn't take on Russian nationality. Had we taken on Russian nationality, we would have never been allowed to get out. But since we were considered enemies of the state because we refused to take on Russian nationality, we were allowed out when there was a window of opportunity after the war. There was the Yalta Agreement, I believe, where all the heads of many states, European states, decided to allow all their foreigners, all the people who'd been there during the war, to go back to their homes. And we jumped at this chance. And we made off from Russia. We'd been there for 6 years.
And do you remember being in Russia?
I actually have vivid memories of Russia. Don't ask me how, but I have. I remember the house. When I say house, I mean a room. And there was 10 of us there, and it never seemed crowded. This is amazing. When people say they're crowded, it's definitely a relative thing. I remember hunger, but I don't remember being overcrowded. I loved it that we had the family around us. And that's why I never really felt miserable. Although we didn't have much to eat, and children need food. But because we were together, I had Lala and Pesha, 3 children, and parents, and aunt and uncle, and Maya and Irma dropped in and out. They were sister and brother of my mother. And because we were a clan, a close-knit clan, always together. And together one is strong, alone is terrible. And because we were, I believe, that's what I looking back, when you are together you're strong. Alone it's very, very hard. What can I say was the most touching, moving part in our 6 years in Russia. I would say I will record one incident and then we'll go on to happier times. Although I wasn't unhappy, I didn't feel any unhappiness. Children don't feel deprived if they don't have enough food, nor do they feel deprived when they do not have enough clothes. Children feel deprived if they lack love. And since there was plenty of love in our clan, there was parents, there was aunt and uncle, and there was sister and cousin, and we were all together. And therefore I don't really remember any sort of unhappiness. I do remember being a bit hungry and saying I'm hungry, and my mother saying that tomorrow and tomorrow there'll be more food. But I don't remember it as a time of anguish. I mean, normally now we would think of it as intolerable because we're so used to food and lots of food and a variety of food, but all that didn't exist. I can't remember, I must have been a girl of 8 or 9 when I saw my first apple. And longer than that to see, oh yeah, and on the ship with Dr. Schonfeld was we were kids, about 150, 200, all refugee children that Dr. Schonfeld picked up, most of them orphans. And we joined the gang to come from Poland to England where we had relatives. Because of course when we came back to England, now I'm skipping the 16
Okay,
years.
so can we just, when you left Russia, where did you go when you left Russia?
This is what I'm saying. We went back to the only place we knew, which was Poland.
And what year was this when you came back? Was the war, had the war?
During the war you couldn't go anywhere.
Sure.
But after the war, as I said, there was a window of opportunity where you could leave and go to your country of origin. So all the many people who were incarcerated in Russia during the war, they used this opportunity to hop onto trains and to go to other European states. We only knew one place, which was Poland, so we went back to Poland. Because we came back to Poland, it was not the Poland that my parents had left. It was 6 years of murder and killing of the Jewish nation. More in Poland than anywhere else in the world. So we came back to a very quiet place, very, very quiet, with the Polish people being just as anti-Semitic as they had always been. No different. They were not apologetic. In fact, they were quite alarmed when, so people came back and they said, what? So many Jews survived? They thought they had got rid of the Jews in Poland. Very, very anti-Semitic. It was clear that a Jewish person couldn't live in Poland due to the anti-Semitism that was there. But where do you go? That's where Dr. Schonfeld comes in.
But when you went back to Poland, did you go back to your house? Was your house?
No.
Was it occupied by Poles, your house?
It was occupied mainly by Germans, actually. There were plenty of Poles and Germans, but you couldn't really tell which one was worse. So we didn't identify. We had nothing to do with any of them. Having said that, I did go to school in Poland the few months that we were there, maybe half a year or so. Pesha, Lala and me, always the three of us together, we went to the Polish school, all the kids with their white hair, and they were so anti-Semitic. Now Lala and I, we were the same age, and we sat next to each other, and Lala had lovely blonde hair, deep brown eyes, with a snooty nose, and I had black fiery eyes, and we sat next to each other, so nobody started up with the two of us. My poor sister Pesha didn't do so well. She had a very pale face with these typical Jewish frightened eyes, and they chepered with her terribly. And I think I mentioned at the beginning that one day Pesha came back. She threw herself on the floor and she said to our mother, I swear I will not go back to that school, because they were torturing her because she was a Jid. And sure enough, that next day we went to Dr. Schonfeld. on Dr. Schonfeld's boat. We alighted the boat and we went with him to England. So, shall we speak about Dr. Schonfeld?
Yes, how did he collect you? How did your parents...
Well, it was very interesting. It's very interesting how Jewish people always seem to know what's flying. And although there were no phones, nothing so sophisticated, nonetheless, my parents heard about this man who was taking children over to England. Now, I didn't have any relatives, but Lala did. She had an aunt and an uncle in London. So we jumped on the opportunity and we used that connection to make off, and we joined the Kindertransport. I don't, as a child, I don't know the number, but it seemed to me like between 150 to 200 children, most of whom were already Lebach orphans. There were some who had parents, but also realized the danger that we were in. It was an intolerable place to stay. And really all doors were shut to us, because who wanted us? Who wanted these Russian, Polish Jewish refugees? No country in the world, not England, nobody wanted us. Very little opportunity. So how did we get out? Well, because the children had gone over to England, we already had one foot in England, and we had relatives in England. It was Lala's uncle and aunt. And so we managed to get ourselves exits, the children, just the children, to England. So we went on this Kindertransport, the famous Kindertransport boats. And I was very miserable because I'd left my parents in Poland and I didn't know when I would see them, if I would see them ever again. I didn't like the thought of it at all. And apart from the fact that physically it was November and it was a rickety, rockety boat that we got into. We were sick as dogs, and all Pesha wanted to do was to die because it was her 12th birthday. She was born in November. And it was very, very hard. I always had Lala, and I was more optimistic. I thought, well, we're getting out of Poland, we must have a future, it'll be good. And the 3 little children came to Harwich on a very foggy, horrible winter's day in November, the end of November. And I missed my parents terribly. Pesha went to the Pinters, family Pinter, and Lara and I stayed with the Corns. Now I was supposed to stay with another family somewhere else, but being me, I said, I'm not going. I stamped my little foot. I was 8 years old. I said, I ain't going nowhere. I'm staying with Lala, which was quite clever of me because I would have been very miserable on my own, especially to the family that I was supposed to be going to, who shall remain nameless. So, to add salt to injury, after a year, Lala's parents came. They managed to get out because they had what are you pointing to?
Sorry, she just wants to have him on.
Bring them in.
Ita, can I just ask you, when did you first see Rabbi Schonfeld? Did he come to Poland?
I'm coming to.
You hadn't seen him yet?
I hadn't seen Dr. Schonfeld until we were in the boat. He came with us on that boat from Danzig to Harwich.
He was on the boat?
He was on the boat, and that's when we saw him. And in fact, I've got a photo of all the children together with Dr. Schonfeld.
And what was your first impression when you saw this very imposing...
Well, I saw this military looking, gorgeous, imposing, dynamic of a man. He was tall and wide and very, very handsome. He had extraordinarily two turquoise blue eyes that shone. And he was very, very, very imposing. Was I scared of him? No, because I was never scared of people. Maybe some kids were, but not me. He was especially friendly and attentive to those little children on the boat who did not have parents, who were Yusovi. So it was all right with us, but it didn't give us much attention because we had parents, so we didn't need the attention. Well, I mean, I always wanted attention, but didn't necessarily get it always. So we were on this boat. Sully, you remember the boat? It's horrible. And they distributed chocolates that the joint from America had sent to these poor little refugees. So they gave out these chocolates, and we children fell onto the chocolates. We'd never seen them in our life. Regrettably, it was November, and there was a storm. And what would a November day storm do to little children's stomach that had never tasted chocolate? We were all, didn't take very long, till we were all sick as dogs. And I remember I couldn't look at chocolate for a long time to come, because we were so ill from the chocolate. On the boat itself, we were also quite miserable, because all the children on the boat were friar kids. Dr. Schonfeld had collected them from missionaries, from convents, from wherever, and many still wore crosses round their necks.
Even on the boat?
On their backs, their crosses. And Pesha, Lala and I were absolutely disgusted. We didn't know the background of everything that was happening. All we knew was that we had left our parents, and here we were with a bunch of friar kids, and some of them were wearing crosses. So we were very uncomfortable, to say the least. Well, Dr. Schonfeld had a wider look, a further horizon than little girls like myself. And he brought these children to the safe shores of England, and he took off their crosses and put on them garlands of Torah. He gave them Jewish education. He took them, put them into Hasmonean school, Jewish secondary school, the Jewish schools. Some went to Yisrael Torah like I did, which was more orthodox, which is like Yisrael Torah today, more or less. And that was really Dr. Schonfeld's great work, that he took those children, and where did they stay? Most of them did not have parents. We, the three little Schlaf children, were among the very, very few that had parents. So those children, those who had relatives, went to the relatives. Some had relatives in America and were shipped off to America. Some had some connection with Eretz Yisrael or just wanted to go, the older one. They said, we're not going anywhere, we're only going to Eretz Yisrael, a land of the Jews. We ain't going nowhere where they're going anymore. So that was interesting. That was the case of my uncle Maya. He came on a different boat, but he said no way. He had lost his parents when he was 12 years old. He accompanied us in Russia. He had his bar mitzvah in Jerusalem, celebrating it with nothing. So when we came to England, he wasn't very happy. I'm not staying in no other Goyish place. I'm only going to go to Eretz Yisrael, where Yidden are. And so he did. He made his way, he went on there, he was actually on the famous Exodus boat.
Ah, he was on the Exodus?
Yes, where the English it was the English mandate in England, and the British soldiers came on the boat and hit the Jews. Those very Jews had gone through hell. Wasn't enough. He hit them, including Maya. Maya wasn't interested in England. I don't know how he actually got to Eretz Yisrael, direct or indirect, maybe through France or whatever. But he wouldn't have any of it anymore. He was a young boy, and he said, I'm not going to live with Goyim anymore. And he went on to Eretz Yisrael, and that's where. To kibbutz, and he met Chayka, and he got married, and to Chofetz Chaim, and Aid, and so that was their life. My life. Do I have to go on?
Please. Can I ask, the family that you were put in London when you first arrived, were they very welcoming? Were they very hospitable?
Very interesting question. They themselves had a difficult, everybody had a difficult struggle. They had little babies, and their niece was Lala, not me, because the mother was a sister of Lala, of Raja. So I was the fifth Hood from Vogel. I wasn't really, and I felt a bit out. It was a bit much for my aunt to have two instead of one. One went to the Pinters, Pesha went to Pinters. And Lala and I stayed. I was supposed to go somewhere else, but of course I refused.
You didn't want to go with your sister?
No, I was closer with Lala than with Pesha, because Pesha was nearly 3 years older, and she was busy telling me always what to do. And so I went for that.
Politics back then.
But Lala, we were the same age. So not that we didn't chepper each other and tear each other's hair out, but we were like Siamese twins. We were together all the time. So I didn't want to be separated from Lala, the same age, exactly the same age. So I stayed with Lala by the courts until her parents came from Poland. They came first because they had protected, she had a sister that lived in London. So she managed to get her visas and stuff. She came to London. And I thought, oh no. Lala's parents came, which is lovely, my aunt and my uncle, but I will never see my parents again. I didn't believe I would. But Hashem had different plans, and a year after that, I don't know who managed to get them the visas, I don't know those details, but lo and behold, my parents came.
Can I ask, Ita, during this time, did you correspond with your parents?
No, it's a very interesting question. I did not correspond because I had no language in which to correspond with. I didn't write Polish, I didn't know Yiddish, English. My parents didn't know English. I mean, what language was I supposed to correspond in, for goodness sake?
But did you hear from your parents? Did you get messages?
Pardon? No telephones, nothing.
But you knew they were alive?
I knew they were Poland, but I didn't have communications like we have now.
Did you often see your sister during this time?
Yeah, I saw my sister. She lived round the corner.
Okay.
She was by the Pinters, and Lala and I were together by the courts. And that was it. And we stayed there 2 years.
And you went to school?
I went to Conservatory School.
And can I just ask, how was it like learning English?
Children pick up languages very quickly. So language wasn't the problem. I just was miserable as sin. Because I didn't have my parents. And what was I doing in this strange country? Learning what? And I looked at the kids and I looked at the teacher. And they were saying so many mundane things and learning mundane things and living a mundane life. And what do they know what happened to the Jewish nation? And I actually expressed that sentiment to one of the teachers. And she turned around. I think it was not Sterbo. What was I can't remember. It was either Feldman. I don't know. One of the English teachers, and she said, "You'd be surprised. We do know what you went through because we've read all about it." Sure. So yeah, that was.
What language did you come with? What language did you come with apart from English?
We didn't come with English. We came with Polish and Yiddish. Well, Polish didn't do us much. Polish didn't help us very much in London. Yiddish did, and we communicated in Yiddish until we were able to speak English, which didn't take very long because children grasp languages very quickly.
Do you still know Polish?
Huh?
You still know Polish?
You know any words?
I'm highly intelligent. I've got a nature to learn with difficulty and forget very quickly.
Ita, can I just ask, when you were at school, did any of the British classmates ask you about your experiences during the Shoah, being in Poland, being in Russia?
Well, as I say, my cousin Lala and I were in the class. No. Nobody really asked us too much. Lala and I sort of felt a kind of disdain for the other children because we thought, well, what do they know what's up? They're silly little English kids who know nothing. We were a bit resentful that they hadn't experienced what we had experienced. So we didn't connect very well with them. I had one friend, I will say, who's now the Rebbitzin of Bnei Brak, Rabbi Landau. Do you know her, Miriam Landau?
I've heard too.
You don't?
I've heard of her, but...
Well, anyhow, she was quite a personality, and we sort of were quite friendly. I was also quite friendly with Ruchel Ashkenazi, who is now Babad. Bernstein was sicher nicht du. She was Baumgarten then. Yeah, there were some good girls in the class. But one thing I was not interested in, and that was learning. I was much too emotionally contrived. I was so emotional about the war, what we had gone through, that the last thing that interested me was what the teachers had to say. No matter what they would say wasn't interesting enough. Because, I remember once an English teacher got me up to the front. I should tell my story. Oh, that was easy. I just stood there and told them all about Russia and the woods that we went to pick berries and everything. I remember that I let go and I really, so I wasn't very interested in studying.
And when you told your story, did your classmates, were they intrigued? Did they ask you questions?
No. It wasn't the time of questions and answers. You know, the teacher called you out, you told your story, you told to sit down and get on with it. I don't think that, it's not the way it is now. It was just there were lessons and you listened and you were supposed to learn, and then the bell went and you got out. And it wasn't very exciting, the school that I went to. But I suppose it wasn't the school, it was me that wasn't really prepared emotionally to sit and learn. I think we're not very good at sitting and learning, are we, conventionally?
And did Rabbi Schonfeld come and see how you were doing, or was he in
That was
contact?
very interesting. Actually, it wasn't Dr. Schonfeld. He had established his own schools. The Jewish secondary schools that were slightly more modern. So the Torah was Rabbi Pinter's school, which was Hasidic. And Dr. Schonfeld, he founded a number of schools, of which there's still the Hasmonean school in Hendon, which has got elementary school and a senior school. None in Stamford Hill. The Stamford Hill is wanted full. And his schools were too tolerant.
Too modern.
Too modern. So his schools didn't last in Stamford Hill.
But did he ever come and visit you, or find out how you were doing?
There was once a reunion. I do remember a reunion for all the children that came to Dr. Schonfeld. It was in the Victor Hall in Lordship Road. And we all went there. And do you know who headed it? Who were the machas there? The Grunfeld girls. Do you know the Grunfeld girls? Dr. Grunfeld, Naomi, and Hanneli. Judith is the mother. Yeah. She had two daughters, Hanneli and Naomi. They were ganze knackers. So, yeah.
Did you ever come into contact with Dr. Grunfeld?
Yeah. She loved me. Dr. Grunfeld loved me. She really did. She got on very well with me.
How did you get to meet her?
I don't know. I think through through the children, Kindertransport, all that. She was involved. She was a wonderful personality. She was in charge of the Jewish, what was it called, Jewish secondary school.
She was like a secretary to Rabbi Schonfeld as well.
She was his
secretary,
his colleague. She worked with him in the war and also after the war. They went to Sheffield. They started the Yiddish community in Sheffield when the bombs fell in London. And they opened up a school for Yiddish children there. So she was a big personality, Judith Schonfeld. And they came from the same kind of background, Oberländische kind of background. And they were very good friends. And did he come to visit? Did she come to visit? Well, I went to Yesod Torah school. I didn't go to the Victor school. Because Yesod Torah school, where my mishpucha was, more from and everything. But of course, I kept in touch with Dr. Schonfeld. I wouldn't let a personality like that go by. And we really did love each other very much. Although I wasn't a teacher in her schools. But I somehow met her here and there, and I had beautiful letters, and could I kick myself for having lost those letters that she wrote me. She was very poetic. And she wrote beautiful letters. And we used to exchange letters. We were very good friends, but then I lost the letters, didn't I? That was the end of that. But I was very friendly with Dr. Schonfeld. She was a personality. I wasn't going to miss that, was I? She was a huge personality.
So are you.
She was highly intelligent. She was educated by none other than Zoroastrianism, but she was a sophisticated part of that. She studied and everything, but she was a Talmidah of Zoroastrianism. But there was nothing simple about it. She gave her a Yekich and she went to study, and she was very educated. But she was a Talmidah of Zoroastrianism, and she always told a story about Zoroastrianism. So she was a highly intelligent and highly interesting person. That was part of my memories, and I'm only sorry that I didn't look after the memories like the letters she wrote.
Are you in touch with her daughter?
Which one, Naomi? Well, I'm friendly with her daughter, yes. I'm friendly with Hannah. I'm friendly with Naomi, yeah. I sort of am extra nice with them because of their mother. Yeah, I've invited them to my house, and we come across each other. Yeah, I have kept contact with them. Not too much, because I don't keep contact with anyone, do I, Tom? Only my children. But yeah, Naomi, do you know them? Naomi?
I know the granddaughter, Sarah.
Huh?
I know the granddaughter, Sarah.
Okay, I don't know the granddaughter. I know the daughters, Naomi and Hannah. They were too brilliant for their own good. I don't know, they were very, rather complicated. Highly intelligent, maybe too intelligent. And the mother educated them too much with French and this and that. And they were, both of them, then mixed up. Because then everybody became terribly awfully from. And they didn't quite fit the pattern. I don't know if you remember them at all, Tommy. And Naomi used to come to my house.
And can I ask, when did your parents come to England?
They came 2 years after I'd been there.
And how was your interaction when they came?
I went mad
must have
with
been.
joy. I just literally jumped up and down.
Did you know they were coming? Were you told in advance?
Because my uncle and my aunt came a year earlier, and they said that my parents were coming, and I was just jumping up and down like a lunatic.
And can I ask, when your uncle and aunt came, where did you stay? Did you stay with your uncle and aunt?
With my uncle and aunt, and then they bought a house, the first house. My parents and my aunt and my uncle bought, the two brothers bought the first house in England, in 2 Durley Road, and the two families lived together. One upstairs and one downstairs, and the children together. And we lived happily, very happily there, until my father, because my father was a restless person, energetic, active, And when there was this Medina, the Heilige Medina of Eretz Yisrael, my father was one of the first ones to go. And he went into the Ger. He wasn't a Gerahus, but he went into Ger. He went into Ger because there was a Rebbe. And my father had a minister deacon. And he went into the Ger Rebbe. And the Ger Rebbe was the Bais Yisrael then. He was very interested in all the refugees and all the people that came. It was the first generation of refugees after the war. So he showed great interest in everyone, in their background and in their story. And when my father told the Rebbe that 2 Schlav brothers and their wives and the children all lived in one house, 2 Delhi Road, he said, "Zwei Brüder sollen nicht wohnen unter ein Dach." So my father came back with the news, and it was, whoa! I felt like the family were divorcing. We'd been in Russia together. We'd been so close, and Lala and I were like inseparable. We were like Siamese twins. Oh, what's this? What, we're going to be separated? It can't be. And my mother she said, look, it's so hard for me anyhow. Why do you have to make it harder for me? I cried and I put up a fight. I was dead against it. We've been here, been all together all this time, and we should continue to be. So it's like divorcing, and if you want a divorce, then divorce. I'm staying with the Slavs, with the 2 Delhi. And the little rebel that I was, I actually had the audacity, the first Shabbos, to stay back in 2 Delhi Road with my aunt and uncle, because I refused to move. Bit of a rebel.
Ita, can I just ask, can you relate your first meeting when your parents came back, when they came to England?
No.
Do you remember your encounter
I remember
with your
I
parents?
was hugely happy, but I don't actually remember I don't remember the coming together.
It must have been very emotional, being separated for over 2 years.
It was, you can be sure it was, but I'm not going to say I remember something which I can't.
Yeah.
I was just living for the day that they would come together. It was difficult because we still lived all together in 2 Delhi Road.
But your relationship with your parents, was it...
Spontaneous, or did it have to be built up again?
Did you connect because sometimes it can be difficult to reconnect.
Well, it was 2 years, but it took me about, 1 minute?
Sure, it's lovely to hear.
They were my parents.
And your sister as well, she felt the same?
Yeah. My sister stayed with other parts of the family, with the Pintas, because she was older. Lala and I stayed together with the Corns. You know who I mean, the Corns?
Esther's grandmother.
Esther's grandparents.
And did your parents acclimatise well in London? Was it difficult for them?
Well, I can't speak for them exactly, but they were very happy to get out of the fall to Poland. I mean, they came out of Poland, so anything was better than that. They came into free England, and they very much cherished the freedom of England. Also, my mother had been educated in Billet, so she knew English, so she didn't have a problem with the language. And she went about teaching my father and my uncle English. And we acclimatized very quickly. People who go through difficult times don't take very long to get into things, to acclimatize. You know, you just get on with it. You don't think what was and will. You just get on with it and do what you have to do. That's it.
And did your parents meet with, I'm sure they must have met with Rabbi Schonfeld?
Of course, they were very
And
friendly.
they were close?
They were very friendly with Dr. Schonfeld. They were very grateful that they met a few times. Oh yes, they showed great appreciation to him. Oh yeah, oh yes.
And were you friendly with the other children that were brought on the Kindertransport? Were you friendly with the other Kindertransport children from Rabbi Schonfeld?
Well, we came with, there was about 150, 200 children.
But did you have connections with other children?
The short answer is no, because I was together with Lala. We were Siamese twins. We were the same age, and there was my sister, so it was the 3 of us. Also, majority of the children were not from. They had come from missionaries and convents or whatever. I don't know where they went to here. But we did have a reunion once or twice. But I do remember that it was very alien, it was very strange, because the children were not Heimish. They were not Yiddish-speaking children. They knew Polish and they knew English then. They were not Heimische children. But there were Yiddish children that had been in convents and missionaries and gone in camps, I don't know where they were. But they were not Heimish. We were very fortunate because we had been with our parents. And we still knew about Shabbos and Yom Tov, and we spoke Yiddish. So we were different to them. And they were never assimilated. How many remained from, I don't know.
But Ita, can I ask you, with Rabbi Schonfeld's Kindertransport, the children that he brought over, did the vast majority go to Jewish families?
Yes, he made sure. What happened afterwards, I don't know, but he himself had Moridik Mesiras Nefesh to ensure that all the children would go to Jewish families and that they would go to his schools. So he put them into Yiddish schools until they felt they didn't want to be in a Yiddish school.
He gave them the opportunity.
But he gave them the opportunity. Yeah, he did his best. He did everything he should have done. What happened with a lot of the children, I don't know. They weren't, some of them came from very assimilated homes, backgrounds, and they didn't want to be from. Some did.
I think the wonderful thing with Rabbi Schonfeld is that he took any Jewish child. It made no difference.
Yes, whoever was a Jewish child, he didn't care.
A Yid was a Yid, and it made no difference where they were.
He was very broad-minded. He didn't. He was not judgmental. A Jewish child was a Jewish child. A Yiddish and a Shuma that had to be saved, and he saved them.
And Ita, can I just ask you, what is your feeling when you read or when you heard that there were people that were very opposed to what he was doing?
Come again?
What is your feeling when you hear, or maybe when you heard later on, that there were, in the Jewish community, there were quite a few people that were opposed to the work that Rabbi Schonfeld did?
One of the things I did, because I did quite a few things in my life, I went to teach in one of his schools. Although the Stanford School would belong to my relative, Rabbi Pinto, and I was there first to teach, I decided I've got to go and teach in Dr. Trumpet's school because I have to show him how chorus are told. I was a young girl, nobody told me, and Rabbi Pinto said to me, why are you going to Golders Green, to a modern school? So I said, I want to show Rabbi Schonfeld how chorus are told. And he said to me, well done, go and have Hatzlacha. He was very big-minded. This is Rabbi Pinto. So I went to his school in Hendon Lane, was it? In Hendon, and I was the teacher in his school for 2 years. He was still alive then, yeah. And he was delighted. He was so happy that one of his children was a teacher in his school. He was absolutely thrilled.
And he remembered you, I'm sure.
Of course he remembered me. Why shouldn't he have remembered me? It was what, how many years later? 10 years, 12 years later, he remembered me. Mit Schlaf. So I was a teacher in one of his schools in Hendon.
And what did you teach?
Oh, it was in the junior school. I taught everything. I think Lamud Chol and Lamud Kodesh, whatever it was. Yeah. Then afterwards, of course, after I got married and everything, I stuck to Yesod HaTorah. I didn't go any further. But I did have a stint at his school. I thought that was the least I can do. It was very interesting. My parents never interfered and said, you should be a teacher here, you should be a teacher there. They just let me go my way. They did. When I look back at it, so many families, so many parents tell the children, go here, do this. No, my parents were very free and easy with me. And they knew I was basically good and from an area. They just let me get on with it. So I went to Hendon to teach, to Stanford, they didn't care. They really didn't care. They were very proud of me that, we had this deep faith. That was it.
It passed down a generation.
Huh?
You also educated your children that way.
Did I? Well, let them get on with it.
What became?
I do believe in I don't believe in pushing Yiddishkeit down children's necks. I really don't. I believe that we've got enough strength in us, in our genes, in our children's genes, that they know the right from the wrong. And you don't have to push it down their throats. They know what's right and what's wrong.
Ita, can I ask you, it's a difficult question. Can I ask you, when you heard or when you read that Rabbi Schonfeld had a lot of opposition within the Jewish community?
Well, but that's the way of life. All
did
great.
it not upset you, or did it not?
It did make me hugely angry, and I remember in the staff room when I went to teach in Dr. Schonfeld's school, I was only a schnips. All the other teachers had been to university and everything, but cocky me, I was not half as educated as any of them, but what I lacked in knowledge, I made up in confidence. So the second day, I remember, it was the second or third day when I was in that school in Shah Hall Lane, Hendon. I walked into the staff room and they started criticising Dr. Schonfeld. That he's not tolerant, he's autocratic, he doesn't let people have this, I don't even remember the argument, didn't let people have a say, he just banged his hand and said, this is what you do, and I heard them out. I opened my mouth. Wow, how dare you speak about Dr. Schonfeld like that? A person who saved hundreds of children, you sit here, English girls, and dare to complain and to criticize a great man. I opened up my mouth and I shut theirs. I did.
That's amazing. Sure.
What's amazing about it?
No, kol hakavod. It's wonderful what you did. They say he actually saved over 3,000 children.
Pardon?
He saved over 3,000.
There you go. So he didn't deserve that I should stand up. I don't care about the teachers. I couldn't care less. I was a young schnips. I was one of the youngest in the staff room, the least educated. And I opened up my mouth and I shut theirs. Good and proper.
And can I ask you, when Rabbi Schonfeld, when he was the son-in-law of Rabbi Hertz, the chief rabbi, when they chose the next chief rabbi, I think it was very controversial because many people thought that maybe Rabbi Schonfeld should have been given the position.
They did talk about it, but Rabbi Schonfeld was too frum in his own private life, and he was also far too controversial to be chief rabbi. I mean, he was very controversial and he was very autocratic, and that wouldn't suit the British society, Jewish society one iota, just out of the question. He could never have been considered. He was autocratic. He said, that's what it's going to be. No questions asked. You know, he was autocratic.
But I think his determination
he was wonderful.
That drove him to...
But some people didn't appreciate him. They said he was autocratic, dictatorial, and stuff like that. I used to always stick up for him.
Anita, what made you decide to get involved in Schonfeld Square?
Well, I created Schonfeld Square, built Schonfeld Square, as a tribute to Dr. Schonfeld. I was so sad there was nothing in his memory. So then I went into housing. And the first project that we completed was beautiful Schonfeld Square, so I decided to call it after him. And I remember, it was all English people in my committee, and they all sat around the table, and we started to discuss the name for this project. And I said, we are going to call it, talk about dictatorial, autocratic, we're going to call it Schonfeld Square. And I looked around with fierce eyes, and not one of you dare say anything. Nobody did. It went through the committee notes. Committee notes were, you know, the minutes were noted, and it was Schonfeld Square. Have you been to Schonfeld Square?
Not yet, please God, I will be going soon.
You have to.
I think I've driven
past.
past.
It's a blessed place. Anyone who comes in there says it's just a blessed place.
Are the children, the Kindertransport, staying in Schonfeld Square?
Well, you're talking about 80 years ago.
Yeah.
It's 75 years
But are
ago.
they still?
What?
In the beginning, were there any?
In my time,
The last 25 years then?
anyone who shared
Kindertransport?
it. There are some people who shared, like, what's her name? Hannah Greenblatt. Is her name Greenblatt? Do you know her?
It's a kind of Greenberg.
Huh?
It's a kind of Greenberg.
Yeah. She was Dr. Schonfeld's, one of Dr. Schonfeld's children, I think. How do you know her?
Because she's one of the children.
Well, there you
So
go.
I've spoken to her, yeah.
Yeah, so we meet once a year or something. We meet once a year at some occasion. An Artman.
And have you had events to commemorate or to
Yes, we did
memorials?
used to have reunions.
Reunions?
We used to have, but when he passed away, you know how it goes. He passed away and it sort of all fizzled out really, except for Schonfeld Square that we called Schonfeld Square, and that stays on, that lives on.
And Jonathan, his son, Jonathan, his son, he comes and visits Schonfeld Square.
Oh yeah, he comes.
And the other son, the other children?
Yeah, Jonathan. He comes in there. But I mean, he's so not the personality his father was.
His father was unique. He was.
He's just an ordinary person, really.
And what message could you give us about Rabbi Schonfeld? Your impression of him?
Of what?
Of Rabbi Schonfeld. They say he was the unsung hero. He was.
I don't know how unsung he was. He was controversial. And were he were alive now, he would be just as controversial. He didn't discuss things. He would say, that's the way it's going to be. He was dictatorial. And in the time of war, or post-war, it was very important. But in times like now, he wouldn't have a leg to stand on. He would have been very miserable, and he was. When the times, he wasn't good for normal time. He was there, he was brilliant for the dangerous minutes, for the difficult times, because he showed courage and greatness. But in everyday life, he had no patience for silly little things. He was a great man. He had no patience for silly little. He wasn't small, he was large.
And can you just mention, how did you get your MBE? That is a very big deal.
How did it go? Well, we went to Buckingham Palace, didn't we? Who went with me?
Sarah.
Huh?
Sarah. Sarah.
Sarah, my eldest daughter, went with me, and
Hindi.
Hindi. I took with Sarah and Ari, I think.
Was this for your contribution to the Jewish community?
Yes, actually, I got an MBE for the housing efforts on behalf of the Orthodox Jewish community. And that was great fun. F-U-N, fun.
And the Queen gave you the MBE?
Actually, the Queen, Shyam stood next to her, because he took out of the box, he stood next to her, in Shamsham and everything. And he took out the medal from the box and he handed it to the Queen. And somebody else had put the pin in so the Queen shouldn't work too hard. She shouldn't have to make a pin, dig a pin it. She just slid it on because to make it easy for her.
Tell them the story with light show with the Queen.
Who?
Tell them the story you had with light show with the Queen.
I forgot. What was the story of Lightship?
He made light show with the
Oh yeah. So there was Leitch Chersky, who was also on that day when we were getting the medals. There weren't many.
Maybe it was a different occasion.
No, it wasn't a different occasion. It was the very same occasion. And Leitch Chersky, she was a kinder from Hungary. She went through the war and so on. So she also got this medal. She was awarded a medal on the same day in Buckingham Palace. And what happened? Sorry, you remember better than me.
No, you told me.
Oh yeah. So she was going to go into the Queen, and she was all nervous. I was such a chutzpaniak, I wasn't. I was looking forward to it. It was such fun. She's only a person, My yes. So she sat on the. Anyhow, But Elijah was all nerves. And I said to her, Elijah, what are you nervous about? Just go to her and pull up your sleeve and show her your numbers. I said that to Elijah. I think she did. She was nervous. I wasn't nervous. It was such, would you be nervous? It's fun. What's to be nervous about? It was just great fun, you know.
And she did it?
Huh?
Yes, she told us something. What was she told
Oh
us
yes,
so.
she did. Oh, he remembers back. She said, ew.
No, what did Elijah say to the queen?
What she said, I don't remember. Oh, she said
Told
that
us slowly.
she said that she helped people
In the war.
in the war because she was in the concentration camp. Ah, yes, now I do remember. She said she had a beautiful voice, Lachaczewski, a magnificent voice, and she was also blonde. That's why they kept her alive. She had a small nose. She looked like a goiter. So she was given life. She said what she used to do, they would stand her up on a table, and she would sing for the prisoners, for the inmates. And she did have a fantastic voice. So she was honoured.
And she showed the Queen the number?
I told her to. I said, roll up your sleeve and show her your numbers, will you?
Did the Queen ask?
She didn't. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what he said. I'm just, it's going back a few years, this whole story. I'm very disappointed that she hasn't asked me again. It would be such fun. Huh? It would be such fun. It was just one word, fun.
Wow.
It was just all gold and red and all luxury and all. It was Malfatti. Everything was just so. It was very, very majestic. The English, very nice. Very, very. Some people were tittering it up. I was laughing. Some of the people were shaking in their boots. They were so scared. When before their turn came, we had to queue up and everything. And I couldn't contain my laughter. I thought, what are they nervous about? I mean, she's supposed to have done. She's giving me a badge of honour. What's there to be nervous about?
You're amazing.
Well, what was there to be nervous about? And then, what did she say to me? What did I say? Oh, I can't remember. She's only a human being. Well, she's a queen, but that's not the point. So that was it. Anything else? That's enough. Goodness me.
Ita, can I ask you, what message would you give? I mean, you've gone through so much and you've seen so much. What message would you give to the future generations?
Get on with it. You can. You can do it. I don't believe in the can't. Don't give excuses. Just get on with it. Okay.
And through all what you and your family went through, you never lost emunah, you always kept.
Well, I think that we were extraordinarily fortunate. Though there was no food, but nobody had food. We were fortunate that we survived, that my parents survived. Of course, their families were destroyed. All our families were, but my own personal family, my parents survived. And not only that, but Hashem blessed my parents with a son after the war, many years after, so 12 years after. A son was born, so they had a Kaddish as well. So I'll never forget how happy I was when Avrom was born, my brother was born. I jumped in the street because I knew that my father had wanted a Kaddish so badly. He was a Chassidish Shahid, and he had had a daughter before the war. And then he had two daughters, Pasha and me. And he didn't, and for us, Chassidish Shahidim, to leave a Kaddish is such an important thing. And we didn't have, I was so distraught about it. And then Avrumi was born, 12 years younger than me, mind you. Oh, it was one of the happiest moments of my life. And sure enough, I remember when my parents passed away. And I heard him say Kaddish,
Sure.
Avrumi. I was so moved. And I again thanked Hashem for giving us the opportunity. He's Talmud Chacham, does the things that my parents would have wanted him to do.
I just want to thanks. Ita, I'd just like to, if I could for a second, I know. I'm just going to. Wait. So Ita, I really want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It's been the most amazing experience listening to you and your achievements. You're an
Hashem
icon.
gave me the opportunity.
You're an icon, really. You deserve your MBE, but you are an example that we can all emulate. You really are something very special.
Every one of us has got a different tafkid in life, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me various opportunities, and I used them. I thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for having sustained me and for allowing me to do nice things and good things, and I hope that the remaining days of my life I should also have the zchus to do mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim, and the rest is nothing.
So Ad May Bisrim in good health, mazel and bracha.
Thank you.
And all of Hashem's blessings.
So your name is?
Les Glassman.
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 And you live here in Eretz Yisrael?
In Beitragan.
From America?
South Africa.
Oh, South Africa.
Ita, thank you so very, very much. Really, it's been absolutely unbelievable.
To have a daughter like my Tammy, my beautiful daughter Tammy, who's such a tzedek and so wonderful, such a balas midos, and so talented.
And I have the zchut that your family are my patients. It's a very big zchut.
Who's your patient?
All of us. We were.
So was my lovely daughter Tammy?
Yes.
Yeah.
What, you fix their teeth? Fantastic. What do you use to do?
It's a great zchut. Ita, thank you so very much.
Oh, interesting.
Thank you.
So you know my daughter Tammy.
Sure.
In easier times.
Well, Besorot Tovot. Besorot Tovot, only good news and mazel and bracha.
Yeah, thank you. You too.